Hello, and welcome back to another Jenny Mac Talks to a Stranger. I totally wholeheartedly believe in the idea that nothing is ever new. We're just recycling other people's ideas. And shortly after I started this project, someone pointed out to me that someone else had done it in a different way and actually went to all of these places. So after my friend told me I was lazy, I did look into the book, and it looks pretty awesome. And then I had another one of my guests mention that I should reach out to the author and talk to him about his experiences. So that is what we're going to do tonight. So I'm excited to bring on the screen with me Chris.
Yes, hi.
Hello. And now I've already asked you how to say your name, and I already know I'm going to do it wrong. How do you say your last name?
Vondracek.
Vondracek.
Yeah.
Because I thought Vondracek is what I thought. So Vondracek.
Some folks think because of the Von, they think it's a Dutch name, particularly, kind of in that Sioux Falls corridor. You'll hear that, but it's actually Czech. Kind of from my father's from like Verdigris, Nebraska, which is like an hour southwestish of Yankton.
Okay.
And there's a kind of bohemian crew there that kind of rivals the crew over in Tabor. Anyway, Czech, bohemian, Vondracek.
We don't want to start any border wars here.
No, I know. Well, they have like rival Kolach days. Czech days is Tabor, and then Verdigris has Kolach days. But I have to admit that the Czech days was a little bit more bumping than Kolach days, and I have loyalty to Kolach days. But anyway, we can sometimes go down that rabbit hole and talk about that if we want. But
that's a different podcast.
A different podcast, yeah. Czech festivals.
My first question is, originally, are you a South Dakota native?
So I was born in Albertley, Minnesota. And so I grew up in Minnesota, but my mother's from Beersford, and I was baptized at the church in Beersford. And so I've known South Dakota, like I kind of have grown up.
You were washed in the waters of the Dakotas. So.
Yes, exactly. In the sort of Big Sioux River Valley there. So
in the eyes of the Lord, you're a South Dakotan.
Right, in like the Sioux Falls Diocese or something. I don't know. And my father's from, like I said, Verdigris, but they met like teaching in Hurley, South Dakota, which I think is Turner County.
It is, yeah.
Okay. So they met in Hurley as teachers. And then they went east for better teacher pay, which we could also talk about. So then I ended up being, raised in Minnesota. So I've always identified as a Minnesotan. I went to college in Vermilion I got 2 degrees as a coyote. And then I ended up teaching back in Minnesota, like teaching English for like 7-8 years. And then I met a gal and moved back to South Dakota. And now, so the rest is sort of history. But
so right now, what part of South Dakota would you consider your home base?
Like physically where I am right now?
Well, not necessarily, because you're
right
for work, right?
I'm in Hughes County, so Pierre for work. I've never been in Pierre this much. And then on the weekend, thank you. It's like that's.
I shouldn't nail Pierre because I shouldn't, because I'm going to talk to people from there, and I have talked from there. But this time of year, the rest of us are all kind of like, Pierre.
Yes, that's what it is. Is that I do think that I've had good times in Pierre, and I think there are moments when I think, wow, Pierre is really beautiful. But what I see of it is, particularly because of the pandemic, I'm like in my room often, and I'll go to the press room. But like I'm in 2 places. So Pierre is mostly just this bed and breakfast. But so on the weekends, I'll go out to my in-laws have a place south of Hill City. So I'm kind of, that's kind of where my like mental home is right now, is out in Hill City. And at some point in this year, we'll be relocating somewhere. My wife, because my address, like I said beforehand, is currently DC, where I've lived for the last 2 years. At some point, we'll move to South Dakota, and we'll have to figure out where that's going to be. East River, West River, in between. We don't know.
Anywhere you pick here is better than DC.
Oh, I love DC though. See, okay, I love South Dakota.
I've never been.
Really? What's really fun about DC, I think, well, there are many fun things, but one of the cool things is that it's a town where everyone from across the country moves. And so we can go out, my wife's from Yankton, And so we can often go out, somewhere at a bar, and we can hang out with South Dakotans. We know a number of South Dakotans who are like in the district for work or whatever. And so we can talk with I can have beers with our friend Josh from Oldham, or go up and get our friend Sarah from Sisseton has her husband likes to smoke meat in Maryland. So it's like, we can
they legalized that there. They're far more progressive.
Smoking meat on Thanksgiving is legal. Yes. Anyway.
A longtime friend of mine, Ross, is there, and definitely I had to shake his tree a little bit on one particular day this January where he was sort of radio silence, and I was like, and he works for a certain office that he should have been telling us all he was okay. And I was kind of like, don't make me come there, because
totally.
It was worse.
Totally. I was on, like the Lori Walsh show on SDPB.
Mm-hmm.
I was on that show because I had started my new job. So I'm a reporter for Forum News Service, and I had started my first week out in DC, and we live like 3 blocks from the Capitol. And so that was actually I kind of sort of spilled my guts on that show, but it was pretty horrifying. And actually we were like in communication with our friend Sarah from Sisseton, who was like, she's like, do you guys need a place to stay? Like blah, blah, blah. And actually my wife during the inaugural week stayed with some friends down in Virginia. Because just where we live was like what they call a green zone.
Right. Well, and Ross had been here in Sioux Falls and home, and then he went back to DC, and I actually thought, why didn't you stay here till the end of January? Because why would you? He could work remotely. I was like, why would you want to go back right now with all of this? And so then I was paranoid that he knew something about something that was going to go down in South Dakota.
Oh, well, I was.
You bail on South Dakota to go back to DC? What the hell?
I mean, yeah. So, right. I was in Pierre for this. They had a little protest at the vote on Sunday. Whatever that was.
Little protest.
Very little protest. Nobody. And that's a work thing. So I'll be professional and just say nobody gave me their names. Like I walked up and they were like, here's what we want to say to you, but we don't trust you because you're a journalist, you're a mainstream media person. But then they after I was asked them some questions, I showed that because they were like, I'm from Redfield. I'm from wherever, like Oldham or whatever. And I was able to, say, oh, I know these places, whatever. And then they kind of gained some trust. And then so at the end of it, they were thanking me for including them in my story. I was just like, well, okay. I'm happy that I'm here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And I got out of there. Anyway, but yeah.
Well, let's talk about more fun and adventurous things. Let's
talk
about your project, which is more than a project. It is a published book now, all of poetry. Is correct? It's not any long form writing or stories.
No, there is a couple of poems that read almost more like a prose poem, where it's it is almost like a little short story, but for the most part, yeah, these are, they're not, it's free verse. I don't think I have any, a couple of,
limericks? Do you have any limericks?
I don't have any limericks, right? But so there are some forms. So I have a sonnet. I have something called I have a haiku, very short. So yeah, it's 66 poems for 66 South Dakota counties that I started when I was working for a legal news service, where I had to tediously search every single county for new lawsuits. And the person who was my editor was a guy out in San Francisco, and he was kind of apologizing to me. He's like, oh yeah, South Dakota is one of these weird states where there's way too many counties, right? Kind of like Iowa, where Iowa has 98 or 99 counties or whatever.
Right. Kind of like the way Canada feels about how the United States has 50 states. They're like, as far as countries go, they got too much going on.
Too much going on. Right. And so I just had a friend actually who was like, they should just combine the Dakotas. And I was like, that's heresy. I can't, there's so much difference. Anyway, so I ended up, I actually loved it. I actually found so much interest in reading these lawsuits in all these counties. And reporting on them. And so much of the stuff that not all of it, but it spurred in my head. I was like, I should do some sort of collection where I'm like taking people through these counties. And then I got caught in a dust storm coming back from like, actually it was north of Pierre. And it was the craziest thing. Because I remember my grandmother, who grew up in Union, lived her whole life in Union County, like went to high school in Vermilion and went to, but grew up mostly south of Beersford. She talked about in the Great Depression, like sweeping dirt off of the furniture in the morning and then again at night. And so I was like, wow, this is really full circle that I'm now caught in this like dust cloud. And so anyway, that's where the kind of inspiration came. And so then I spent like, I don't know, a couple of years writing, rewriting again poems. And the counties that I hadn't hit up yet, kind of inadvertently, in my life, I set out to hit them all up. So I would like drive through sometimes twice. Sometimes I'd stay in a hotel, like, in wherever, and then in Belfouche, and then try to like gain something about the place. So it was difficult to get poem material for some of the counties, right? Because I'm just a fly on the wall, right? I'm just a car driving through, and so I'm still waiting for someone to be like, "You totally got my county wrong."
Well, that is for most of these little visits, chats, as I've started to call them. Mm-hmm. My first question, I keep asking people the same first question, and every single one of them goes, "Oh, wow, good question." And they don't know for sure what to do. And my question is always, when other South Dakotans talk about your county, what are the rest of us getting wrong?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because, I think about Minnehaha County, right where I live, even here, even myself, when people elsewhere talk about us, they say Sioux Falls. And we're way more than Sioux Falls.
Totally.
And when people say, everything it tends to be on one town or one city or like, one scandal or whatever.
Right,
and we're more than that. And so
no, totally. Okay. So in my head, I often thought people from the county, when they read the poem that I've written for their county, will maybe not like it, but they will like the other counties' poems, right? And I say that because, like, for example, like Pennington County, and I lived in Rapid, working for the Rapid City Journal, and like I said, I have like this family place in Hill City, and in Pennington County, there are so many different kind of iconic tourist spots or events that you could write about. Everything from like Mount Rushmore to like the Alex Johnson Hotel to like whatever, the bleed over from Sturgis. There's so many things. But what I wrote about for Pennington, I kind of didn't want to give like the Great Faces, Great Places version of the counties, like the touristy version. I kind of wanted to give something different. And so particularly with Pennington County. And so one of my most memorable nights that in, I think, Western South Dakota was when my wife and I and her family stumbled upon a football game at the Hill City football field, which is like, it's the way I describe it is going to make it maybe anticlimactic if you've never been there, because then I'll build up in your head and you'll be like, this is actually just a normal football field. Right. But like the way that I experienced it that night was when you come into the main drag from Rapid, you get off to the right and it's like back off the road, tucked near like there's like a slate wall or some kind of rock wall, and there's all these pine trees, and like you get the sense that you are like playing football in like a canyon. And like the way that the crow's nest, like the sort of like speaker is like echoing in that area, and it's just so cool. And like it's the poem I wrote is about that night, and it's not actually geographically accurate because like I talk about being able to see the sawmill and the smoke from it, which you totally can't. The small mill is like 5 miles away. And actually, when I was back home or back out there this weekend, I was like, wow, that's like not accurate, right? But when I was like rewriting it from DC, in my mind, I was like, all of that stuff was like a snow globe, right? It all kind of came closer together. And so in some respects, the poems they are about my experience of those places. And so, I don't know if what people, it's tough for me to say what people get wrong about the counties, but I can say that like I'm hopefully giving people a different version of the counties than maybe residents even know. So yeah.
What was the title Rattlesnake Summer? What was the birth of the title?
Oh my God, I'm so happy you asked that because no one's asked that yet.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know. And I always think it's like, because
like that's like book interview 101.
I know. No
title. Yeah.
So okay, so various things, but basically, do you know Seth Tepper, the reporter? Okay.
Yes.
So Seth, before I knew him, Carrie, my wife, and I ended up in Rapid City, and he was giving a book talk about his Calvin Coolidge book. And he had said, he was talking about a raccoon wrangler, because when Coolidge came to the hills, like they had Rebecca the raccoon, was like a pet.
Okay.
It was like given by someone from like the South as like a Thanksgiving dinner. And they decided to keep the raccoon. So that stuck in my head. I was like, that's a really funny thing, a raccoon wrangler, right? And then I was working for Courthouse News. And so I had interviewed a guy at the Reptile Gardens about what to do when you have a lot of rattlesnakes like in your backyard, or a rattlesnake in your backyard, because this was back when like Dusty Johnson was like in a primary fight against Chantel Krebs. And both of them had like dueling videos of killing rattlesnakes, which I thought was like insane, like really insane. Like it's just crazy that that's like South Dakota politics kind of like manifests itself.
Let's point out what we look like to the rest of the nation.
No, it was so, and like they actually, anyway, I mean, to not editorialize, I'll just say like everyone gave me interviews for that story. So everyone thought that that was like a good thing for them, which was kind of curious too. But the so I was thinking about reptiles. I had this Wrangler thing pop up, and then Bob Christensen, who runs this thing in his backyard in Sioux Falls called Badger Stock, which is like a poetry music celebration of Badger Clark. They had asked us, my cousin, who's Ted Heron and Flower Man of the Rock Garden Tour. I did not know he was your cousin. Oh yeah.
He's beautiful. Okay, go on.
Yes. So,
I'm really distracted now.
Okay, no, yeah. So right. So cousin Ted, Flower Man, and we were the show was going to perform there at Badger Stock, and Tom Oil Can, who's Bob's neighbor, was like, hey, we want you to read some poems, some of your South Dakota poems that I had already started writing. And he's like, we also need to like introduce you in the program, right? Like in the little booklet they were making, which is like, they go way out to the edge. And so they're like, what do you want to be known as? And I was kind of like, I can't just say poet. That's too like fancy. And so I was like, call me Reptile Wrangler. That's kind of fun. That's kind of in keeping with the spirit of this thing from all these different disparate events. But like, Tom Oil Can doesn't really know how to do formatting on the page. And so like the Wrangler got jumped down to the second line of the program. And so when I showed up, Bob was just like storming through his house. He was like, where's Rattlesnake? I got to meet this Rattlesnake. And I was like, no, it's Rattlesnake Wrangler. And then, but I thought Rattlesnake's a way cooler like title or whatever. And so then cousin Ted started referring to me as cousin Rattlesnake. And so that's kind of the genesis of it's a long story, but yeah.
This is the most South Dakota story I've gotten out of all my interviews.
I'm so happy.
Everything about it, from the fact that everyone had a nickname, that even though I've only met like one of those people in person in passing once, I actually know who most of them are by their nicknames.
Totally.
Like some of them are going to know who Jenny Mac is, because like that's how South Dakota is. That
everyone knows
somebody's cousin and we have a nickname.
We have a nickname. No, totally. Yeah. And also, okay, to your earlier question, something I don't think that people realize about South Dakota is, particularly out west, how dry it is. And that rattlesnakes do cause a lot of problems for some folks. I mean, they're like they're like part of the ecosystem. They definitely should be there, but they can
not in hordes.
Yeah, they can freak people out. Yeah. And like I've talked to like realtors in the hills where they're like, we have like a pit of rattlesnakes and don't know what to do with them. And anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I've been to some roundups out there. I do think that something that people don't know about not all of West River and not all of the Black Hills, but that it is a desert climate. We have a tiny little circle of desert there. And
Totally.
I love going there. People that are like moved to Arizona because of the desert climate and it makes them feel better. I go to the Badlands and I get that.
Yeah, totally. No, and like I think it's lovely. I'm not good with this, but my friend Altman is able to like identify the varied like vegetation and like the cacti, and I think that's really cool. I wish I had that skill set, but I don't. But yeah, it's quite exotic if you've not been out there to sort of see how just completely contrasted that is from like, say, whatever, like, sort of Minnehaha County.
Right. I very much enjoy going out West River and staying in the Badlands, and even it would be my great-great-grandma, my great-great-grandparents migrated from here to out there to live in the desert climate for grandma's health reasons and things like that. So even our family, it's the mountains and the trees and the desert, and you can stay in the Badlands and have a desert sunrise. And
totally, yeah. In fact, I guess I didn't really drive through the Badlands per se this morning, but I was just thinking about how I want to see in the next issue some issue of South Dakota Magazine, I want to see a series of photographs on like the hoarfrost of like Phillip area.
Yeah,
because it's like lunar landscape. And this morning when I was driving early, the sun had come up, but it was like foggy, so there really wasn't a lot of light. It was just kind of gray, and it felt like a photographic negative of the world, and it was just stunning. And if I hadn't been listening to some committee hearing, I would have been in a better mood. But that was,
I think that the reason during session that all of us think about Pierre and go, oh, Pierre, is because we know that someone from everywhere, from all of these places, more than one someone's are now like chunked into the rattlesnake pit, so to speak.
It is. No,
you're in the pit.
I'm in the pit. Yeah.
So what attributes from, as someone who's lived in little bits of South Dakota, lived in another place that's in another rattlesnake pit in our nation, what attributes do you see there, especially since you've been gone and now come back, that all these people from all across our state share? What's an attribute that you look at them and you're like, you think you're so different because you're east or west or ag or urban, but you're all because
you know what I think one thing is that there's a frankness of speech that a lot of South Dakotans have, whether they think they do or not. Like even, for example, this morning during this quasi-budgetary hearing over the Board of Regents, they had put up a slide, and I was listening to it on my earbuds. They'd put up a slide, and they had some numbers highlighted and some were not. And I forget who it was, what legislator it was, but he asked in kind of a technical way, like what those numbers meant. And then the answer came and he didn't like it. And he just then literally said, like, no, what's the difference between the highlighted numbers and the non-highlighted numbers? You know, or like, I think he didn't even say highlighted. Like he said, what's the difference between the yellow numbers and the white numbers? And I was like, wow, that is. And actually, while I was kind of like, I don't want to say I was being condescending to it, but in my head, I was like, that's like a really direct way of asking that. It got the answer. It like got the guy to be like, oh, well, here's what they are. And I was like, actually, I tend to not be very frank in my speech and very direct. And so I appreciate, and so oftentimes I don't always love this virtue that we afford to like telling it like it is. But actually in that instance, I was like, I have to admit that worked. like that was the right question.
Yeah.
So I think that there's something around like what we would like the patois or the speech of South Dakotans that I think East or West River, there's maybe like West River, you get you get like maybe a little fewer words out of a rancher than you're going to get out of a farmer, who's living like, whatever, like up by Aberdeen. But there is a common thread there of like unvarnished, effective, like speech is very functional. It's a tool. It's a tool like a cell phone is a tool or a hammer is a tool. There's not a lot of artifice.
What is something that you think they all come there thinking that they share and that they're the same on, and you're like, no, you're not? Mm-mm.
Oh my God. That's a great question. Well, I do think that their idea of what the state is totally different. And
their idea of what the state is totally different from other legislatures' ideas,
yes,
or from their constituents' ideas.
Probably both. Yeah. Like if you talk, I mean, I think deep in the heart of every politician, there is like a common man or a common woman that they think that they're speaking for, right? But it's like radically different. Depending upon whether you think you are speaking from a teacher on like Rosebud versus like a doctor from Aberdeen versus like a trust fund manager from Sioux Falls versus like, some like out of work or whatever, like miner from Lead, like there's such diversity in South Dakota. And sometimes the way that the politicians try to speak in homogenous tones, or like that this is South Dakota and this is the way it is. I always want to be like, these are South Dakota, right? Like there's so much that we can't, that doesn't fit into our tidy definition. I mean, for me, the quintessential moment when I like ran into the wall of just like how wildly different the state can be is in the basement of, deep down in the mountain in Lead. I once went down there for the Rapid City Journal for like a news story thing. And there were like guys who used to go down the shaft every day to go after gold. And they were down there repairing the mine right next to like postdoctorate, like researchers from Stanford, from Germany. Yeah. And then like, it was just like, whoa, that's such a contrast that's existing in that one place. And I think each community you can find that kind of a contrast.
I agree totally. And I absolutely agree and embody the idea that they think they represent us, and there's not only do most of us think that they don't, but there's no way they can. I almost think it would be easier for one of them to run on a platform of, I know I'm not like you, and I know you're not like that person right next to you.
Yeah.
I know that, you're not like the generation that came before you or after you, but I'm going to try for all of us. We don't really have, I feel like we don't have a lot of try for all of us. And it's funny how you point out that they say we, and you say it should be they. We all know that they're not very good with pronouns. So.
Right.
And these are not supposed to be political chats, my friend.
Okay. Yeah. I try to be, just because of my day job, I try to be right.
It's every single one of them has taken a little bit of a turn. And I would like to speak to somebody that is, publicly, politically far more conservative than myself, because I am seeking some of the same. We wouldn't all still be here if there wasn't something that was keeping us here. And I hope people aren't afraid of that. I've been given some names of some people I should reach out to, and I'm like, I really don't think they're going to answer my call. But
right. Well, and that's it. Is that what's really sad right now as journalists is that I've tried to, in the last couple of weeks, reached out to a number of folks to get their opinion on certain subjects, and just hit like a brick wall. And they're just like, and sometimes they're very general, like they're very polite about it. They're just like, I don't trust, kind of like those folks in Peer that day. They're like, I don't trust you. Like, I don't trust you to tell your version of the story. And you're just like, I don't know what I can do. I'm not gonna get on my knees and like beg you to do this. But I would hope for like the sake of dialogue, we could still, talk, but whatever.
Yeah. And that's been the goal with this project for me is I just wanted to talk to people and I wanted to talk to people that were different than me and find out what I'm getting wrong about where they live, even though I live in South Dakota too. And
Right.
I have been very clear about these are unedited. I don't edit them. My techno flubs, everything, it's all going out. However, it's just, I'm not editing them, whatever they say. And however it's spun, that's what it'll be.
Right.
But yeah, I've got very conservative family and.
Well, it's curious.
I'm freakishly conservative, but people don't know it.
Sure. Right. And what's wild is that we like as a journalist too, I'm trying to avoid using that like conservative or liberal or whatever terms sometimes because, not only because people just don't happen to be in boxes, but also I think it's damaging for the country increasingly to like reaffirm these divides. But like even last week, the Keystone stuff happened, right? And it's like not. I mean, so on some level, there are a lot of folks who are mad about that. But I talked to a guy who was like a white rancher from Tripp County. I put this in my story. Who is like, he's like, yeah, I voted for Trump, blah, 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 blah. I'd vote for Goofy and Mickey Mouse if they were on the ticket or something.
Right.
But he was like, he hates the Keystone XL pipeline. And he's not who you would think of as like a crunchy granola environmentalist who's like, looking forward to his soy latte in the morning.
Right.
It's like, so, and to be fair, I'm sure you could find some people who are like, all in favor of unions, et cetera, and maybe voted for Biden, and they were maybe at that work camp, and now they're going home. So over in Phillips. So it's a disservice to those people when we kind of codify these divisions, I think.
Right. When you leave here and go even just back to Minnesota or all the way back to DC or anywhere else, what is something from the South Dakota area that you miss? That you wish, not just that you miss for yourself, but not that you miss like because you want to come back to it, but what is something you miss that you wish you could take and share with everybody else that's somewhere else?
I wish I could take I wish I could take the music oftentimes. I think that South Dakota, for whatever reason, it has a very, like they oftentimes say in Pierre, it's like, oh, we're a citizen legislature, right? But I oftentimes think in South Dakota that it's like a citizen orchestra that we have here. And there's so many, for our wedding in 2018, we had polka, we had a Missouri style string band play. We had some acoustic guitarists, we had Rock Garden Tour perform, we had like my band played. There's just like such, and like out in the Black Hills, there's a wonderful YouTube video of Red Willow Band. I'm sure you're familiar with
them. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like playing at Nemo or something, and they're just playing this awesome song. It's like Kenny Putnam, and and I just think that like, I think about like Jeremy Hague in Sioux Falls, and I used to go down to Haskett's every day when I lived downtown in Sioux Falls and get breakfast with Jeremy and talk for like an hour about whatever. And like I wish that feeling of being like in the Charlie Utter Theater in Deadwood with like, maybe 20 people, but like listening to just some fantastic music by someone maybe and didn't know they performed.
That's something that I do think people do not understand, and that if you could take it somewhere else is like just that you mentioned Jeremy. It's like I went on a road trip several years ago with a friend who did not grow up around here, and I had Spoon Cat on a CD.
Oh,
in my car,
yeah.
Excited to have a car that I could play a CD on. I'm that old. And she was like, "Oh, I love the sound of this. Who is it?" And I'm like, "It's a bunch of guys I went to high school with."
Totally.
Like, Ryan Wolfer, I think, shoved me in my locker.
Right. Well, have you seen like the?
Sorry,
go ahead.
Here is we have all these different kinds of artists and musicians and that have local and regional and national successes, and we know them.
Yeah. And I mean, my good friend Jim Groth, who's cousin Ted's father-in-law, he's living out there in Rowena, and like east of Rowena, you can see Minnesota and Iowa from his barn. Yeah. And like I've had such good times, like just like sitting in his barn on a summer's night, like recording or like rehearsing some music. And so I think that feeling, I feel very at home playing music in South Dakota. And yeah, I wish there was a way to bring that to other places. But
every show you go to, you feel like you're in the band, and it's probably because they're your cousin.
I know. Well, that's it. Well,
God.
and in fact, do you know Brian Bieber?
I have met him. I don't know him well.
Okay, so
I'm a Venn diagram of all the Sioux Falls people.
Okay, good. So he has a new documentary out about not a kind of it's about like the punk scene.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and it's so cool. And I watched it this fall, like November or something.
Yeah, do you know Nate Jakeway?
Maybe.
He's a doctor in Rapid now.
Oh.
And we grew up across the street from each other. And I think my mom called the cops on him and Green Day every single night.
Right. That's what I mean. Like,
when Green Day was on the Grammys, and I'm like, hey, Mom, what do you think of these guys? And she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, yeah, you used to call the cops on them when they would stay at Jakeway's.
No, exactly. Like, you would hear stories like like when I was in Vermilion, and then we'd come up to like Nutty's North to do shows. And I would hear these stories about like what the Sioux Falls music scene was like in the 90s or like the 80s. And it always felt a little aspirational. Kind of like, you know, the movie Big Fish, when like the guy like tells these fanciful tales, and at the end, all these like crazy people show up to his funeral, and like the family's like, oh my God, our dad was telling the truth the whole time. That's what I felt like watching that documentary was like. I was like, oh, wait, like Green Day really did. There's like footage.
Yeah.
And you're just like, it's like blowing my mind to think that like Green Day did perform, or insert whatever name. Yeah.
And that's actually the life that my kid has, is like all these weird things are real. And like when she started doing, I do random theater crap, and we had her we had her do her show that I wrote. We cast her in it, and I said, what do you want your name to be? And she said, why? And I said, because none of us use our real names. You got to have your show name and then your real name.
Of course, right.
And then she said, well, like, who else has a show name? And I started telling her, well, so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, their real names are John and whatever. And she's like, I've known these people my whole life, and I didn't know that they have secret identities.
Secret identities, right. Well, maybe it's like needed, like maybe like if you like live in New York City, right, where like it's a little more accepting to be kind of a goofball or something, you know, or just out there. It's like a community of people like that. It's okay to use your actual name. But I feel like if you're gonna like do music or theater, like local theater in Sioux Falls or something, it's like maybe you do need to be, because if you want to be taken seriously at like Westward Ho or whatever the hell the country club is, you know what I mean? Like maybe it's good to have like a separate identity.
I think, and when I interviewed Mike Henriksen, he said that he felt that was one of his regrets, is that he didn't create a separate name because when his kids were in school, for his kids. And I have told my kid that. I said, a lot of times it's because you have your life and I have mine, and you shouldn't have to suffer under whatever I'm up to.
Yeah. God, that's so fascinating. You know, that is curious. I think about, well, okay, so like I think about this with respect to my wife, where like she has like a pretty, and I guess I do too now. I have like a normalish job, right? Like I'm a reporter and all this stuff. But like she has a really like pretty normal, like she's by day, she's like doing rural and like tribal telecom stuff, right? And then like her husband's like doing a poetry book, or like I'm making like Facebook videos of me playing at our piano and just like making up songs about like a football player from Mobridge. And it's just sort of like, I hope there's not collateral damage out here. I'm just like, you're being associated with this person. But I think maybe not. People are pretty chill, so I don't know.
But yeah, but it's still South Dakota. As long as for your secular job, you punch in and do what you do. I think that's the other thing. We are a very smart state.
Mm-hmm.
I should have prepared. I did not prepare for talking to you. I don't have good questions. I'm making this up as I go. So thank you for saying great question.
Yeah.
I was pulling them out of that hat you're wearing.
Oh.
But we talk a lot about how young people grow up and leave South Dakota, and how can we retain them? And in one of my last videos, I said, maybe we're just growing our children so well that the rest of the world needs them.
That's lovely.
And
yeah.
What do you think is either the draw that's taking our kids away, or what do we have that they should realize they should come back for?
So I would generally be in the camp of make South Dakota comfortable for the weirdos who, like myself, who like, and I do am attracted to rural places, like whether it's rural Minnesota or rural South Dakota and that sort of thing. But I recognize a lot of folks aren't. And I do think that there's like a really straight laced kind of answer I could give about, like, I think more walkability, more places that have vegetarian food options on their menu, more like arts programming, that kind of stuff is like needed. However, now I want to step into the more kind of like, I don't know, like avant-garde response to this, which is like, why every kid, like that's what kids do. They leave, right? You raise them and they go elsewhere. And hopefully they come back at some point, but maybe they don't. And there's been a lot of like hand-wringing in rural places about this. But I really like your idea, which is just like, we raise them so well, let's go see them take on the world, right? Like sometimes when I hear people say things like the pages are all standing up at the little committee meetings and introducing themselves, and they're saying things like, I'm gonna go and study this at this school 30 miles from home. And while on one hand I'm excited for that, on the other hand my heart breaks a little bit because I'm like,
30 miles away.
Exactly. And it's like, like for me, I mean, I don't know. Like I really do think that the world's a lovely place and we shouldn't, like you could, like I remember going on vacation once to Moscow, and it was like the most amazing thing because I was like, whoa, like we actually ran into people who were like making music about like parts of, it was a whole long story, but like they had South Dakota ties. And so it's a big human family in some ways, you know what I mean? And so right. I think that the more we do that, the more folks come back in too, and we can get that idea cross-pollination, which is a good thing.
So that's interesting that you would say we need to give them art and resources for art rather than better rates of pay.
Oh, well, yeah. So, okay, I probably skipped some things. I would say that too. I mean, like,
no, but I like that because I think instinctually most parents say the first thing is, well, my kid would have stayed, but either the job they pursued doesn't exist here or the money for it doesn't exist here.
Right. Okay, so I used to teach college English, as I had said previously, and I am a kind of radical proponent of majoring in something that people think is useless, right? Majoring in something that is going to feed.
Like, for example, majoring in English, which is my native language.
Yes, like I was actually a journalism major, but then I did 2 master's degrees in English, right? So it's like, studying Moby Dick, right? In a landlocked state. Like, what am I going to contribute to that conversation? But
we're all chasing a big whale, though.
Exactly. No, it's a metaphor, right? It's right. Sort of allegory. But like, I do think that. So, for example, when I lived in Rapid City, I lived with a woman named Yoko, who's a sculptor, and she came. She was in New York, and she told me that she was in a nursing program, and she wanted to go help out. She said she wanted to go work where she was needed and somewhere else in the world. And her like teacher or mentor said you should go to Pine Ridge, South Dakota. And so she got on a bus and she ended up in Rapid, then took another bus to Pine Ridge, and she ended up doing healthcare there for a while, and then was back in Rapid. Now she's a sculptor, and I think she has a beautiful garden, even though it's super dry. And she teaches art classes, and she has these showings, and she makes sushi. And I just think that like that kind of existence exists. It can happen in South Dakota. And if more people recognize the cost of living is really low, and if you want to, whatever, write a novel or play the guitar,
poetry about
a book of poetry, right? It's like, I mean, you hear about this in Vermont, right? People are like, oh, I'm going to move out of the city. I'm going to go up to Vermont and I'm going to like open a small pig farm and like whatever, like do my oil paintings or something. I don't know if that's actually a thing, but right. It's like, you can do that in South Dakota too. So I just love the idea of art being florid in the state.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you spent time with a woman named Yoko, yet you still have a band.
A couple of bands, yes, yes.
That's a cultural reference that I'm old enough for, and you're way too young for.
No, I get that. I like Beatles, and I like checked out Beatles books from the library in Wells growing up. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sitting down and chatting with me a little bit. This has just been sort of a random and wild and all over the place chat.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
But I do. My goal is someday when the weather's warm. It's not even the pandemic that's keeping me home. It's winter in South Dakota. I want to drive around and see some of these things I'm learning about. So I will check out the football field in Hill City on behalf of your.
Please do. Let me know. So how many counties have you visited? So I guess like through interviews so far.
Not or through my project.
Yes.
Beetle County, Coddington County, Brown County, Meade County, Hughes County.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Minnehaha, Oglala, Lakota, Todd. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm my way around.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I
fangirled and like reached out to David Michaud, and I'm like, so I'm like your favorite fight fan. Will you do my stupid little project for me?
No way. Did he?
So
that's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah. So I told him, I said, I haven't got to interview anybody with prettier hair than me yet. And then he was just like, woof.
So, okay. So if I can ask one question. So what are, because and this is such a difficult question to answer, but what are you learning about South Dakota? If there's one thing.
Every single one of these, I've learned something. I did not know that in Redfield, they still have a working and successful drive-in movie theater.
Oh, I know. Yes. I interviewed her this summer. She's did you talk to the what the heck's her name?
I talked to
the Pheasant Drive-In.
I talked to there's an author that lives in Redfield. I spoke with her. Okay. And that's Spink County. I did Spink County. I talked to two people from Spink County.
Cool.
I had never my West River family lives in Pringle, and then I live here. And I had never heard of or had any concept of Slim Butte.
Oh, sure.
Up farther north. So I learned about that from someone, and now it's on my road trip to go there. I don't fly, so I need to find cool things in South Dakota because I'm not going anywhere else.
If I could tell you one little thing.
Yeah.
Near Slim Butte, the Hoover store.
Hoover store. I will make
the Hoover store. It is so, it's like, yes, there should be like a musical or something about the Hoover store. It's in the middle of nowhere, but it has everything you need. And it's like, geez Louise, it's way up there in like, I think Butte or Meade County, one of the two.
Yeah. Meade County. I did Meade County. This weekend I'll be in Rapid City, and I'm going to talk to a few people there. And so, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I learned, there's always stuff that people will say off camera. I learned some things that I didn't know about a couple of our counties that hurt my heart and made me sad, and they're dark things, and someone should talk about them.
Yeah.
And this isn't the right project for it, but
that's tough. I mean, for the poetry book, I had people, for example, who wanted to talk about Lincoln, or there's a lot of beautiful parts of Lincoln County, like down by Canton. But I ended up like we're doing a piece on something a little bit more kind of sad, but it was like, well, I'm trying to do the good, bad, and the ugly, you know?
Yeah. And that's the thing. There's dark stuff everywhere in the world.
Everywhere. Right.
If you can't face the darkness, you really can't enjoy the light. And that's the thing. This project isn't the right project. Especially since I was like, let me just take my jewelry off and drive up there now, you know?
Yeah. And especially like during the pandemic, you know, I think we're all looking for something. I've had conversations with friends in the last couple of days that have been like very despondent. I think we all are seeing the darkness right now in different ways. And so it's really important to have shows like yours to be able to say, hey, what's going on at the movie theater in Redfield or whatever.
And the thing that South Dakota has that the rest of the country doesn't necessarily have is our flyover state mentality of 4 hours. I'll drive it.
I know.
And we're gonna have summer again, and so many of us spend our time when we go to places freaking alone in a car in the sunshine. We are going to be able to go and do some of these lonely things. I think now we will appreciate them because we can do them.
Yep. Yeah.
Where
yeah.
States can't do a damn thing. You can say you want more walkability. That's great until everywhere you walk to has other people, and that's not safe. So, but yeah, I did. And I just talked with my friend Toby, who's going to record with me, and he's going to talk about Corson County. And
cool.
I said, being a show person, I miss talking to strangers because that's part of my performance life. And this is feeding that. So
yeah, no, well, I think it's exciting. Like for my day job, that's what I oftentimes do, but it's nice to be able to sit with someone and not have like a deadline hanging over my head and just kind of chat. So thank you again for the invitation. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chris. And I have been running the ticker on the bottom there with the title.
I love that. Can I shoot a photo of this, by the way? So okay, because I just think this is so cool. We always talked about getting like a ticker for the Rock Garden Tour show of like the school lunch menus. In fact, have you talked to, well, I guess you've already talked to folks from Minnehaha County, so maybe
I want to talk to more than one person from every county, though, because we all have different experiences. Even from Minnehaha, one of them, I've talked to two people, but one of them was my lifelong childhood friend, and we talked about how her growing up Native and me growing up white, even though we lived right across the street from each other. She lived 2 houses down from Nate Jakeway. We grew up having entirely different lives.
Wow. Sorry, go ahead.
Just because we look different.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's an important conversation to have. And I mean, I would be happy to supply with you other names like offline too. Cause like, I don't know. I can think of so many people who can give you like different versions.
I do this to go find me another person that I want everybody to go find me another person that they know is the exact opposite of them.
Oh.
Because we all spend too much time focusing on like, oh, I want to introduce you to so-and-so because I know I like them.
Yeah, I was going to say, so my friend Altman from Aurora County would be a really good interview, but we're kind of in the same wavelength. He's like,
and I still would want to talk to him as well, but there has to be somebody that you really don't like that much. Send them my way.
I'll send you after 2 weeks in Pierre, I can send you a long list.
Yeah. And then I will go, oh, look, I've already scratched them off the list.
Right.
I know that they have me blocked on Twitter.
Right, exactly. That's my life. Anyway.
Too much. So, all right. Well, thank you, sir. I'm going to kind of wrap this a little bit. Oh, that was fun. Everybody do watch the ticker and go visit badgerclark.com, rattlesnake-summer, and learn more about the book of poems and learn more about Chris and buy the book, support local journalism, support local authors. I didn't even ask him questions about the death of newspapers across our state because, that would probably make a journalist sad. So this is a happy project. Everybody have a great night. Thank you for tuning in. Do find me somebody else to talk to from your county. Find me somebody you love. Find me somebody you hate. Find me somebody that'll probably love and or hate me. That'll be great. Have a good night.